a live edition of the Vikings Central podcast. Tom, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. It's Tuesday night. We got mini camp or not mini camp or the rookies are finally reporting finally. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited to hear, just some of the stuff that's kind of, been going on with Jordan Addison. I saw another clip today about Steve Smith, gushing over Jordan Addison. He's got all
Exactly.
three levels. He was talking on an Underdog podcast about he's got all three levels. So, I'm really excited, just to see how Addison, performs at camp this week. And then obviously schedule release on Thursday. I'm very excited to see how rough the schedule is going to be for the Vikings because of when you finish first place. I mean, you play a lot of first place teams. And, if you look at their schedule and their opponents, it is brutal this upcoming season. So now I'm just curious on the order and how many primetime games I got to watch Kirk play.
It's going to be a dogfight, like you said. It's going to be a tough schedule, but it's going to kind of be that, where's this team actually at? You know what I mean? We're obviously not going to win all these one possession games again. It's just kind of a fluke, to be honest with you. It's just the way it is. But yeah, it's kind of going to be, where is this team at? This really tough schedule. I think we got the Broncos in Denver. We got Kansas City comes here. I mean, there's tough road games, tough away games, but that's the way it goes. But we're going to talk a little bit of rookies here, like you were saying. They report Thursday. I think their first day of camp is on Friday. I believe they actually get on the field on Friday, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Obviously, you got Jordan Addison, who's going to come in. Hopefully, he's as polished as they all say, and I don't have any doubt that he is. But get to see Jaren Hall tossing the quarterback or tossing the football around, which is going to be a lot of fun. So, what are you kind of most looking forward to?
Jaren Hall hype, I think whenever you have, rookie camp like this, it's really hard to really know what you are exactly looking for. It's hard to tell, when a rookie wide receiver runs a slant route, you can't, that's not very exciting. Defense, obviously you can't tackle, you can't really touch. So, it's how do you evaluate that? But one thing you can evaluate is seeing a quarterback throw the football. And if you see Jaren Hall start slinging it, and you see him tossing dimes or, making a lot of good reads where he looks comfortable, that's going to get the fan base excited. No one's going to get excited over an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. But a quarterback, just seeing him throw, that's the one position in football that you actually do not need to tackle or see live to judge. You could see how Kellen Mond at the time was overshooting guys in training camp. Okay, you knew, this is not that great. But it's if a defensive lineman or a corner, if they miss their read or something, it's you're not even gonna really know unless you're a true football guy. But just as if you're a casual at home or really just anyone, it's okay, I know a quarterback can make a good throw. I know if he, if he hits a corner route and he hits him right in the breadbasket, okay, boom, that's great. So I'm really excited to see what Jaren Hall has, and just hear reports. But I think what I'm most looking forward to is how everyone just looks great. There's not very negatives you see this time of year in training camp. You don't see, man, this guy's horrible. You're not gonna see the here. You'd be like, I'm waiting for the alert. Jaren Hall tosses an absolute, a 60-yard dime to Jalen Naylor or something, and I'm just oh yeah, that's my new franchise quarterback, Kirk. Step to the side. I'm sold. That's all I need to see. I'm just waiting for whether it's the fans or myself. To really over-exaggerate. Because I think that's the best thing about whether it's training camp, mini camp, OTAs, or rookie mini camp here. The over-exaggeration that we're about to witness this week is going to be absolute bonkers, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, it's the hype, like you said. I mean, that's what brings all these fans together. We all buy into it. We buy into the hype. I mean, obviously there's overreactions the other way, too. If players don't look good, and then we're, concerned and we're freaking out. Oh my gosh, this guy's a bust. This guy's a bust. But, the hype is the fun part of it. And yeah, I'm with you. I can't wait to see Jaren Hall spin the football. Kevin O'Connell finally getting his hands on him, starting to give him, pointers, kind of seeing where he's at right away. But obviously that's probably not going to come for sure until training camp to honestly see where he truly is at. That's probably the most exciting part. And then, watching Jordan Addison as well, kind of just run routes and, be be a smooth wide receiver. But other than that, we're kind of just going to go over, expectations for this class, realistic expectations. We're not going to be like, oh, Jordan Addison's going to put up those Justin Jefferson numbers like he did his rookie year. Obviously, that's probably not realistic unless an injury happens or something like that. But and then we're going to kind of go, best worst case scenario as well. So Jordan Addison, they say he's like the most NFL ready wide receiver coming out of this class, or one of them at least. What's your realistic expectation for him coming into year one?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Jordan Addison, I'm definitely worried that like the expectations are going to be so high for him. Like they're going to immediately want him to be the next like JJ or replace what Adam Thielen did when Diggs was here. I think with Addison, it's going to take a little bit. It took Devonta Smith about a year until he really took that next step. So I think what we need to see, he's going to be having about, we'll say 117-ish, 120 targets. Yeah. I'd like to see him at least come away with about, I think, like 70 to 75 catches. And I'd like to see him. I'm not going to freak out if he doesn't get 1,000 yards. But if he gets about like 850 to 900 of like 6 to 7-ish touchdowns, I'm completely cool with that.
For sure.
For a rookie year. I think the expectation for him has to be like T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins is a good comp. Where, when Jamar Chase came here, Higgins was still good. Like, I think he barely got over 1,000 yards, and he may have had like 8 touchdowns. For a big body receiver, I'm okay with him being, a sidekick. He doesn't have to be anything special right away. I just want to see him, honestly, just, show up in big time games, big moments, help take the pressure off JJ, where I'll be pretty pleased if, Vikings win 10 games. And then if they're a playoff team and then we see, Jordan Addison really establish himself as a very reliable option, someone who could get you 4 to 5 catches a game for maybe like 60 yards and a touchdown here or there, or use them in the slot, use them all over the field. We just got to see, like, ultimately we have to see just an upgrade of what Adam Thielen did last year. And Adam Thielen did not do much. I mean, the fans love him. I mean, we all love Adam Thielen for what he did the last decade. But you have to, be productive. You can't just show up in garbage time games. You have to be available and you have to stay healthy. I would say that's the number one thing I want to see with Jordan Addison. Play 17 games. That's it. Play 17 games, have a fairly large target share. And then let's just see Kirk cook. That's what I really want to see, because if Addison has a great year, JJ has a great year, Hawk has a good year, odds are Kirk Cousins had a good year, and then the Vikings, which then results 2 wins. So, I think
the top 5 offense probably,
It has to be, and I'm very interested to see obviously what happens with Dalvin Cook. But I think for Jordan Addison, I think if he's top 5, in the like a top 5 finalist for like offensive rookie of the year, I mean, I think that should be the expectation with this offense, with the amount of targets he's going to be receiving. I think it would kind of be like a failure if he like had like, I'm not going to go like crazy like a Laquan Treadwell type year, but I think if he potentially has a year where it's like, let's say, 40 catches for, 600-ish yards and like 3 touchdowns. Okay, that's probably not a good year, something I want to see from what expectations were. And then at that point, just trade back and try to get, go and wait for a Tank Dell or a Josh Downs later in the draft. At that point, you're picked in the first round. The expectation is you are going to produce right away. So that's what we need to see. We need to see a guy that's going to come in, step in, and establish himself right away as the number 2 to JJ. And if not, then, we're going to have some questions.
Yeah, and I think we've been like super spoiled with wide receivers. We had Diggs, Jefferson, and obviously, 20, 25 years ago, we had Randy Moss, Chris Carter. But we've also had the Laquan Treadwells of the world. We've had Troy Williamson. So, we feel pretty good because we have had a pretty damn good track record with wide receivers. But yeah, best case scenario, kind of where you're at, he could probably hover around that 1,000 yard mark. You're only going to get so many yards when you got Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, taking up a pretty big target share. But, there's no reason that, he can't be pushing for 1,000 yards if he comes in ready and he is as polished as everyone says he is. 70 to 75 catches is probably pretty realistic, I'd say. Like you said, kind of comparing it to Adam Thielen, but being more explosive. Adam Thielen averaged like 10 yards a catch. I could see Jordan Addison being 13, 14, 15 yards a catch, which is only a couple yard difference, but, that's big in just moving the chains. And that shows that you're being explosive in the passing game. And then
Yeah.
kind of where you were. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, one thing I think that we might not have just touched on here was, yes, we want him to outproduce Adam Thielen, but I think we also want to see I think we want to see this offense have a deep threat. We want Jordan Addison to spread the field. That's why he's here. That's what he did at Pittsburgh. That's what he did at USC. Minnesota really hasn't had a deep threat, and I'm not going to say – I know KJ Osborne's had a few of them, but I don't think they've really had a deep threat since Diggs or Aldrick Robinson, someone who could really stretch the field. Justin Jefferson's the best wide receiver in football, but he's like Devontae Adams, where he doesn't really have – you can't send him on a go route consistently. Yeah. He's not Tyreek Hill. You can't do that. He's a possession receiver. He's not a deep threat. Yeah, there's a few times you could scheme him that way, throughout the year. We've seen Devontae Adams, like with Las Vegas last year against Kansas City, where there were times where, yeah, he stretched the field. But that's not really their, strength or what they're asked to do. They're there to get first downs, slants, post, crossers, stuff like that. Where, Addison, I know his speed was not great for his weight, but I'm not too concerned about that because the tape always overshadows.
Oh, for sure.
Or overcomes, I would say, what a combine is. To me, a 4.49, I think he ran, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. And I believe if he adds some weight and, and they start working with the trainers, I think he can increase that to potentially a 4.4 flat, over time. Because he's only 21, maybe 21 years old, where he's going to have the opportunity eventually to stretch that field. And I'm excited to see Kirk, they're going to run it with Madison early. Maybe hit Hawk over the middle a few times. But then I'm just so excited to see Kirk play action and sling it deep. And next thing you know, Addison's just separated himself and boom, big time works. This offense was great last year, but to me, this offense just benefited heavily from always trailing. So their numbers are a little inflated, where it didn't seem like they could score in instances. Where yes, if they were really cooking and feeling it, yeah, they could score. But it seems like it was always when it's scripted, they could score fast. Second quarter slow, third quarter slow. Oh, we're down by 2 touchdowns in the fourth. Boom, boom, boom. Now with Jordan Addison, the expectation has to be we can score as well as Kansas City. We can score as well as Buffalo. We can score as well as Cincinnati, as Miami. We have speed now. We don't have old aging guys. There's no Kyle Rudolph around. There's no Adam Thielen around. You have TJ Hawkinson. You have Justin Jefferson. You have even KJ Osborne. I'm not a big fan of him, but you have KJ Osborne. And now you have Jordan Addison. Stretch the field. Kirk, sling it. Do not be gun shy. I want to see a 7-7, tie game, and they start being more aggressive because I think O'Connell really held back a little bit last year because he didn't know what he has, or what he had. Now he does. Yep. He handpicked TJ Hawkinson in that trade. He handpicked Jordan Addison. Everyone in the right mind would pick JJ, of course. But now he's got his weapons, and we saw Sean McVay. He slung it a lot when once Cooper Kupp was there. They had Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, Higbee. There's weapons there now that are very similar to what we have now, where I want to see them stretch the field. And I think that should be every fan's, that should be what they're most optimistic about right now, is that this team could stretch the field. TJ Hawkinson could stretch the field. So Kevin O'Connell, it is now your time to shine and take this offense to the next level.
Yeah. Another year in the system, another year of play calling for Kevin O'Connell, adding a weapon that can be explosive in the passing game with Jordan Addison. There's no reason why this unit shouldn't be top 5 in scoring, top 5 in yards. That should be a realistic expectation for this offense. And I think they can get there. So I think it's going to be an interesting year. They do need to sling it down the field. They need to add that element to that offense. And I hope Jordan Addison can add that element to the offense. But kind of looking at worst case scenario for him real quick, we got to move on to some other guys here as well. But the worst case scenario I could see is, like you said, kind of that 30 to 40 catch area. And maybe, his size, his frame is a bigger issue than what it was really led on to be. But I think his route running is going to allow him to get open at least, 30, 40 catches throughout a year.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where I'm looking, worst case scenario. But I think he makes an impact one way or another. But we're just hoping for that for sure guy that's going to get that 70, catches, 800-yard type situation in his first year. Let's hammer these two out real quick. We got Mekhi Blackman and Jay Ward. So two defenders, one from USC, one from LSU. We can just kind of do this as a tandem here. Mekhi Blackman, Jay Ward, what's kind of your realistic expectation for them? Will they contribute right away? Will they start? Are they going to be special teamers? Are they going to be riding the bench, practice squad? What are you feeling?
I think Mekhi Blackman, I think he's the guy that I think he has a real good shot to win the job, like right away.
Sure.
I know expectations he might play nickel, but I think he could really establish himself on the outside. Kind of be like a Jonathan Jones type player, someone like in that area, in Asante Samuel, someone like that, where I feel like those, those smaller guys. I believe Blackman, he might only be like 5'10", 5'11". I could be wrong. But, he's a guy that I think does play bigger than what shows on tape, where I believe he's he's a high energy guy, and he held his own in the Pac-12 against some of those schools. So I'm very excited, to see what he can do. For Jay Ward, I think he's a project. I think, I believe he was a 4th round pick. I think when you have those type of players, I think you kind of have to just wait and see what they develop into. Like, I don't think he's like a Cam Bynum where you're waiting, but I think he's more of a Brian Asamoah where he's eventually going to start. You just don't know when. Yep. So I think with Jay Ward, he's a guy that's going to probably sit the bench. He might start if like a Harrison Smith or Lewis Cine go down, but he's a guy that I think takes over a year from now. Where I think he's probably the Harrison Smith's replacement. I'd be shocked if Harry was on the team a year from now. Just due to
I can see them planning ahead for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Kwesi's very, very calculated. He's extremely calculated. So I totally think that, Jay Ward, who's going to fill that Jimmy Ward role, eventually Jay Ward, Lewis Cine, that's your new starting safeties for the next 5 years if they hit. I think that's ideally the plan, and then they're going to keep building these corners on the outside, which is where Mekhi Blackman comes in. And I think if everything goes right, I'm not sure if a Caleb Evans is ever going to stay healthy or solidify himself as like a corner one. But I do think for the next few years, you could have Byron Murphy on the inside, Mekhi Blackman on the outside, and Andrew Booth on the outside, along with Jay Ward at safety, Lewis Cine at safety. That's a secondary that can, if they all develop correctly, can be together in a nucleus for the next 5 to 6 years at a very high level with Brian Flores. So I think the expectation has to be how fast or how slow is it going to take for these guys to kind of develop? Where are they going to be at? Because the worst case scenario is an exact, situation that happened last year. Guys can't stay healthy or they're underperforming. And then boom, the draft class looks terrible yet again for a second straight year. And then Kwesi's going to get a reputation at that point about you're just living off of, Rick Spielman's, core pieces that he left. You're not developing anyone. And that's not a Kevin O'Connell thing. That's not a coaching staff problem. That would be then a Kwesi problem. So I'm very interested to see how these guys perform. I believe Mekhi Blackman has the most upside of any corner in that room. And before, he was here in Minnesota, Andrew Booth was a guy, I think, if he develops right, that's an all-pro corner right away. But health, that's what it's going to come down to. Andrew Booth can't stay healthy. Caleb Evans can't stay healthy. Your cornerback room's like 23 years old on average.
Right.
So what are you going to do? And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen is stay healthy, develop, learn, and work your way up the depth chart. I think that's what has to happen for both of those guys. And I think Blackman's a guy that, I think he's going to be a home run pick. And I think he'll be your day one. I think he'll start on the outside. And Andrew Booth, I hope he does, but I don't know. But Blackman, I do believe, and I have a lot of faith in for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty high on Blackman as well. And I think the Vikings were pretty happy with where they got him. I know the consensus was a little lower, like towards like the 120s, and we got him at 102. But I believe Kwesi, when he said that, they were going to take him at 87 if they didn't get a trade down opportunity. They were pretty high on him. I think Brian Flores really, really likes Mekhi Blackman. Just his type of corner, feisty, competitor. Yeah, I think he's going to put his fingerprints on that cornerback room right away. And I agree with you. I think Jay Ward could be a really good special teamer out of the gate. I think.
Yep.
Just good length, good intangibles to, be a gunner or just make a difference on the special team units. But yeah, Kai Blackman, I for sure think he's gonna fight for playing time right out of the gates. But we're about halfway through. We got a couple more guys to talk about. I'm gonna play a quick clip here from our guys from Rock'em Sox. Thanks again for tuning into today's video. We have a special company that we have been working with, and we want to let you guys know. We have been working with Rock'em Sox. Here's my Viking socks right here. Got my Justin Jefferson Gritty socks. Amazing quality and a fantastic product. You do not want to miss out on these guys. They know what they're doing at Rock'em Sox. You can go to my link, rockemsox.com/Vikings-Central, and they will get you hooked up. They also do boxer briefs. Obviously, you see my Vikings ones here. They pretty much have every NFL team, every NBA team, pop culture, and more. Just an amazing company that are ready to work for you. Again, Rock'em Sox. This is what their site looks like. This is the Minnesota Vikings Gritty socks. Obviously, Justin Jefferson. rockemsox.com/Vikings-Central, and they will get you hooked up. Honestly, I wasn't even kidding when it's amazing quality. I mean, these socks are amazing. Yeah, they're like the official sock collector of the NFL. So, yeah, really, really cool products and really good quality products. So, check those guys out. We got another defender here, Tom. Jaquelin Roy out of LSU. Kind of a lower standard for what his 2021 season looked like compared to 2022. Didn't have a great 2022 season, but 2021 he had like a really good season. Was kind of like a fringe first round draft pick if he would have came out. You pretty high on him, or do you think he's more of a project? Where are you at with him?
He's actually, outside of Addison, he's like my favorite pick because I think he has a pathway to be starting day one. Right now, we really don't know what the defensive line is going to be looking like for the Minnesota Vikings. And Jaquelin Roy, again, like you said, he was a guy that was a projected first-round pick a year ago. I'm not sure what happened, but you have right now Harrison Phillips, and then you have Dean Lowry, and then is it Kyrus Tonga? Because they're 6'3", 4". So I mean, is that real? Where's the competition there? I think Harrison Phillips has established himself as a starter, but then I think at that point, I mean, Jaquelin Roy easily could outbeat either of those guys. To me, Dean Lowry's like he's like a guy that you could do like a spot start, but he's more of a guy you want for depth. So in Kyrus Tonga, he showed flashes last year, but he's kind of been a backup. He's bounced around the league from what I remember. I believe he might have been with like the Bears before.
I think so. Yeah,
but he's a guy that's kind of bounced around where it's like he doesn't have a lot of heavy draft capital. Jaquelin Roy could step in like right away. He could be your Dalvin Tomlinson replacement. I believe that's actually his like NFL comp is Dalvin Tomlinson.
Sure.
So I think when you're looking at that, I mean, even Ross Blacklock could, maybe he could work his way into the rotation as well. But I think there's a possibility. We see a lot of like late round defensive linemen. Defensive linemen for like a D tackle, a nose tackle. Those aren't like premium positions that you have to take in say the top 10. Like those are guys you find all over the place. You can find them the first, second, third, sixth, seventh, UDFA. Calais Campbell was a late round pick. There are guys that you could find late. And I think Jaquelin Roy, I think he's a guy that has the best opportunity and best pathway to be a day one starter for the Minnesota Vikings. And it starts this week in camp. He has to show himself. And he reminds me a little bit of kind of like that Ed Ingram pick last year, where not many people knew who he was. We knew he came from an SEC school. But when you look at like the analytics or PFF, this guy was actually pretty productive. Why is he available, at this round? Ed Ingram was, he was like PFF. He was like a 90 in like everything last year coming out of LSU. I believe this past year, I believe that Roy was like a 77. Like, where that's not like elite, but that's more so like above average. And that's what the Minnesota Vikings need. His strength is rushing the passer, but he can also stop the run. And that's what Minnesota needs. They need to stop the run. There was too many times last year where this secondary would be exhausted, and then boom, you have all of these guys, they're just running between the tackles. Harrison Phillips was great. Dalvin Thompson was great. But then you kind of see, they hit the A or B gap and 5-yard gain, 5-yard gain, 6-yard gain, 3-yard. They just grind that defense, and then boom, play action, play action, play action. So now it's like, okay, they need to establish like balance. That defense has no balance, and that was the main reason last year. It was either a game your secondary looks great, or your linebacking core looks great, or your front seven looks great. They can never come together. And I think establishing, your core pieces going forward is where it starts. You need to establish a blue chip defense alignment. Could it be Roy? Maybe. You need to establish a blue chip linebacker. Could it be Brian Asamoah? Maybe. Corner, could it be a Mekhi Blackman, or could it be a Andrew Booth? Safety, could it be Lewis Seen? These are the questions that have to be answered this season. And I think Jacqueline Roy is kind of like the first piece of that puzzle where, he's really the only defensive lineman really that Kwesi's finally like invested in and drafted. Because most of his drafts have, they haven't really been focusing on the offense or defensive line. Now we see it. We saw Ed Ingram last year, not great. Now we're seeing Jacqueline Roy. He's a guy that I think is a sleeper that's going to surprise people.
Both from LSU too, so that's kind of interesting. But I think at minimum he's like a rotational piece right off the get go, and I think that fifth round value. If he's at least rotational, I'm good with that. But I think he could get some big time snaps right away. And one of his like his pros during this draft process, and I think I said this before, the dude gets better as the game goes on. I'm sick of seeing our defense getting gashed in the third and fourth quarter because we're just, we're gassed on that defensive line. So if this guy gets better as the game goes on, that's a big time get in the fifth round. But I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but because he was a first round pick, I'm going to kind of compare him to. Yeah. And his career kind of ended a little earlier. He was a really good pass rusher, very powerful, and was pretty good in the run too. Sharif Floyd. Now I don't know if that's super fair, but I kind of see the same traits, that they can get after the passer. They can kind of be that defensive anchor a little bit in the middle. Not a one-trick pony, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I think I really like that pick. That was probably my second or third favorite pick in the draft too. I mean, I like this draft overall, but yeah, I think he has – what's that?
I say, I don't know, is it me or did this draft seem very balanced and like mature?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You didn't see a lot of, swings or home runs. Like it just felt like a very mature draft where it's like, okay, we address this position. We address this position. It was very balanced. You address secondary, you got a receiver, you got a quarterback, you got a D lineman, you got this. Where that's what I
think. That too. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the kind of drafts that you should want. You really shouldn't have a lot of activity unless you're really like a rebuilding team like the Chicago Bears. Like, yeah, move up and down the draft board all you want. But I think we're the Vikings and, just what they did. I really enjoyed this rookie draft class, and I think they have a lot of high expectations, and I think there's a chance this could be one of those draft classes that we look back a few years from now, like, wow, Kwesi found a lot of contributors.
Hell yeah. That would be great, and I kind of feel the same way about this draft. It's like it felt like it wasn't his second draft. It felt like this was like his fifth or sixth draft because it was, like you said, really matured, like a seasoned vet, just, not taking any huge swings, huge risks, kind of, premier positions. It was a really, really well done draft by the front office. I would agree with that. Real quick here, Tom, I got to get going here in a few minutes. Jaren Hall and Dwayne McBride. Jaren Hall, obviously, both me and you are pretty high on him as a quarterback. We love him, but, we've tempered our expectations. We're not saying he's going to come beat Kirk Cousins out or anything like that. And then Dwayne McBride, we feel pretty good about him too. That was a really good value in the seventh round, especially if Delvin Cook's on his way out. Then he has to beat out snaps from Ty Chandler and Alexander Madison, which he more than likely could if he's the real deal. Where are you looking at for those guys year one?
I think for Dwayne McBride, I think it's just establishing yourself, having a good preseason, and just making the roster. Because I believe one of two things are going to happen. They're either going to try to put McBride on the practice squad, hopefully. That means Dalvin Cook's staying. Or Dalvin Cook's traded soon, and then he's going to make the roster by default. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out. But I do think McBride is a guy. I don't know if he'll ever evolve to anything special, or he'll like, I don't know if he's going to be like insanely like impressive, but I think he's just going to be a guy that kind of like bounces around the league, or, he's not going to be a star, but he's going to be a guy that I think you could feel very comfortable. Kind of like what Madison's been these last few years. A good second string running back that stays healthy, and he's a bruiser. That's really all you should ask for out of a 7th round guy like that. Make the roster, kind of like CJ Ham. Just a guy that, you're solid, you know what you're getting, and he sticks around. That's what you should want out of Dwayne McBride. I think if anyone just has high expectations for him, you're kind of, you're way off the ball. There's not Isaiah Pacheco every year. There's just not.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're just looking at him, just make the roster, stay on the roster for the next few years, play well when called upon, and just do your work, go home. That's what it should be for Dwayne McBride. And I think for Jaren Hall, there's not a lot of expectations for a 5th round pick, because they easily could trade up for Caleb Williams next year or go after Drake May if they want to. So I do think for Jaren Hall, I think best case scenario, you beat Nick Mullins for the backup job. Yeah. Worst case scenario, you get cut in camp like Kellen Mond. Like, that's worst case scenario. But then there's that in between where it's like, okay, he shows signs of positivity, and then boom, he's the 3rd string, and the Vikings decide to carry 3. That's kind of like in the middle where I'm at, what I'm kind of hoping to see. Just play well in the preseason, show that you could process information, and just learn from Kirk and Nick Mullins. Yeah. Nick Mullins is not a bad guy to learn from as well. He may not physically be one of the top tier quarterbacks in the league, but he's a guy that's bounced around. He's learned under Shanahan, and he's a very smart guy. And a lot of smart quarterbacks last long in this league. Chad Henne was one of the worst starters that you could probably ever imagine, that you don't want him rushing out there for you if needed, if your starting quarterback goes down. But man, that guy was a smart guy. That's why he stayed in the league so long. Chase Daniel, another guy. These are guys that have stayed in the league because of how well they process information. So that's what I want to see from Jaren Hall. Just be a guy that Kirk could kind of rely on and just learn. Get your little notepad, learn, take down notes, whatever you got to do. That's what I want to see out of Jaren Hall. I don't need you to go out there and win the starting job, but I also don't want you being bad enough where you're cut as well. So just stay in the middle and just do your job, and that's what I want to see, because I truly believe Jaren Hall has an opportunity to stick around for a while. It's just, can he do it is the biggest question, and that's what I want to see at training camp this week.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most realistic option too, where he shows flashes, he shows potential. O'Connell wants another year under the belt with him. That's probably the most realistic option. Hell, we would love if he came in, just outplayed Nick Mullins, just played fantastic, won the QB2 job. I don't see that happening. I don't see him getting cut either. I know he's a 5th round pick, but I think they put some stock into this quarterback. So I think they want to just see it out for at least a full off season, kind of see where he's at through the season, and then come back again next year. And obviously, they could take another quarterback next year, and in the 1st round. So all this could be, mute anyway. So, but thanks for joining, Tom. Any last tidbits you got?
I thought the Bryce Young, stuff was pretty interesting today.
Yeah, that was.
When Tom Pelissero reported that, the only quarterback the Vikings were ever going to trade up for, it wasn't Anthony Richardson. Like, I think everyone on Vikings Twitter got fooled. Oh, they're moving up for Will Levis. They're moving up for Anthony Richardson. No, to me, that strikes a lot of faith that they were going to trade up for Bryce Young of all people. Like, that's the guy that they evaluated as the guy of the entire group. Right. And to me, he was the best quarterback. Yeah. So to me, that gives me a lot of faith that next year, if they're picking in the top 12, there's a good chance we see them go 49ers on the bit, and they trade up to top 2, top 3, and they move up for Caleb Williams or a Drake May, or maybe someone kind of stands out this year, which I think that guy could maybe be like Bo Nix or J.J. McCarthy. Those are 2 guys I really like that I think could take a next step. But man, I don't want to ever rule something out, but man, I don't know if I'd be surprised if they moved up for Drake May next year or Caleb Williams.
Same.
Both those guys seem like guys that Kwesi would have no issues trading 3 first-round picks and more for. So that's I just think that tidbit kind of just it told me more about Kwesi and O'Connell, who they are, more so than it's just like a BS report that doesn't matter. Oh, Vikings missed again. I'm like, no, this kind of tells me that they had one guy, and if they don't get their guy, they're not going to ponder it. They're not going to ponder on the pay. They're not going to take one to take one. They are taking their guy, and that's what I'm really excited to see.
And I think they know next year's draft class is above and beyond this year's draft class behind Bryce Young. So it makes sense that if Bryce Young is for some reason at the first overall draft pick, okay, now we're gonna get more active with it. But yeah, that does make sense. And that kind of makes the Jaren Hall pick make a little sense too, because he's like a diet version of Bryce Young a little bit. I'm not comparing the two. They're both mobile, both a little bit undersized. So that makes the pick make a little more sense to me. But I love the pick overall. But yeah, I got to get going, Tom. Thank you for joining, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for joining in. And we'll see you in the next one.